Texas running back Jonathon Brooks will be a top 5 pick in your dynasty drafts if he lands with the right team. All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can read her at Pro Football Focus and Behind the Steel Curtain. And it's a Wednesday episode, so of course that means Matt Williamson is here. Follow him on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Go check out his new YouTube channel as well. We're going to answer your mailbag questions today, and our first one is a really good one coming from Matt Williamson. He actually has his own question that he wants to answer, which is a lot of fun. Matt, what team or what teams are you looking at in this NFL draft where if they land the right running back, they could potentially be top 5, top 6 picks in our dynasty leagues?
Yeah, I want to look at this through kind of two different lenses. Is what are the spots you love? And frankly, you can comment on this better than I can, but Dallas to me stands alone. I think the Chargers is another one that comes to mind. I'm still not 100% sold on Pacheco. I think the Chiefs are an interesting one. Cincinnati's not terrible. The obstacles in Vegas aren't that bad. So even the Giants, I've never been a huge Singletary fan. They're not the best offense out there, but there's some good landing spots. How long is James Conner going to be around in Arizona? I mean, Joe Mixon got money, but I thought he was a declining player, and I'm not quite sure what Houston was doing there. So there are some definite – we could end up with some rookie starters this year. I think that's safe to say. So I pulled up just the Superflex ranks on Dynasty League Football, and as of now, without knowing landing spots, the highest running backs they have rated are in the rookie class are Benson at 13, Brooks at 14, behind Adonai Mitchell, ahead of Keon Coleman. Now, if either one of those guys, and I prefer Brooks, I can't speak for you guys, but I prefer Brooks, but there's obviously the injury stuff there. If either one ends up in Dallas or in a premium spot, could we rewind a week to last Wednesday, and could they compete with Brock Bowers for the 7th overall spot? Or are they in the Brian Thomas neighborhood at 8? Are they ahead of J.J. McCarthy? Or if May lands in New England, where do you guys think on those?
I'll jump in real quick because we actually talked about Jonathon Brooks yesterday on our rookie profile, and we named some potential landing spots. And one of the landing spots, obviously, is the Dallas Cowboys, which has been mocked a million times by now. And we went with the assumption, if Brooks does land with the Cowboys, where would you rank him among your dynasty running backs? And where Kate and I landed is somewhere around RB6, RB7.
Overall.
Overall, that instantly makes him a top 6 or top 7 pick in your rookie draft, and maybe even higher, because the Cowboys are a team that every year they're number 1 or number 2 in offense. Every year their running backs are super valuable from fantasy, and Jonathon Brooks is only 20 years old. How could you not pick him super high in your drafts?
And I think the same kind of goes for Trey Benson, who we haven't talked about yet, but we're going to hit on tomorrow's show, actually. I do think that there are a lot of open positions right now, which I'm kind of surprised by, because we had a very big free agency class in terms of the running back position. We saw a lot of guys get paid, but I think there's a wide open door for a lot of these guys to have 200 plus touches here in year one, even despite the fact that this isn't the strongest running back class. But I think those two names at the top are probably the most interesting for me in terms of, making that case for, 7th overall in your rookie drafts. I think
Could
that's fair.
they compete with Bowers?
Oh yeah, absolutely. For me, they would.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I mean,
And
there's such a
if we're
scarcity.
excluding tight end premium, I
Mhm.
think so. If you're in a tight end premium, that's probably where I give um, the edge to Bowers, especially if you're in positional need. If you don't have a Sam Laporta, an elite tight end, I'd lean Bowers in that circumstance. But outside of that lone circumstance, I'm in on the running backs, and I think you take them ahead of these tier 2 wide receivers like a Thomas, a Troy Franklin, a Lad McConkey. I am taking them above all of those guys.
Matt, I want to ask you really quickly about a different team that could land a running back. And I'm looking at the Cleveland Browns. They have picks
Yeah.
54 and 85 right now. And they're going to move around the board because they just don't have a lot of picks. But you look at their roster, I think running back is one of their biggest needs, even after restructuring Nick Chubb's contract. I have no idea when Nick Chubb is going to play. I don't think anybody has an idea. But if they draft let's say it's Trey Benson in the top of the third round, does he instantly become a top 7, a top 8 in your pick in your dynasty drafts, just because that situation has been so fruitful when it comes to the running back position?
Yes, I'm mad at myself for not mentioning them because I frankly think the Chubb restructure was just a nice way of saying we're not going to cut you because that's our other option.
Come rehab on our dime, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you've been good to us. You got the short end of the stick there. Obviously, a tragic situation. And if you get back, great. The other guys aren't much of an obstacle. It is a little odd for the Browns to use their first pick on a running back, but they don't have a lot of other roster holes. I mean, they have 4 quarterbacks on under contract. I could absolutely see them maybe not getting one of the top 2, but what if it's, I don't know, Corum or Lloyd or Estime?
Jalen Wright.
Yeah, right.
Imagine Jalen Wright on that offense with the speed. Like, I just think they're one of these teams where they're going to land a running back. We just don't know where.
Yes.
And I think whoever they land is going to see a massive jump in their dynasty value just because that situation is so good.
100%. So, wanted to get back to the other question. It sounds like you guys are both putting them in Bowers' neighborhood ahead of Thomas. But what about in Superflex? Would you take running back to Dallas over quarterback 4?
Kate,
I mean,
I'm deferring to you.
Yeah, it's
Definitely depends on landing spots for me. If JJ McCarthy is a Minnesota Viking,
yeah,
I give the edge to McCarthy just based on landing spot. But
okay,
if, let's say, McCarthy goes to the Giants at 6, right? Or they trade up and get in that conversation. Like, I do think maybe, there are some underrated teams that we could see make a move. But McCarthy to the Vikings is the only specific instance where I give the edge to the quarterback in that situation over the running back.
I agree because, like, if JJ McCarthy lands with the Giants, I just have no interest in that right away, especially with all the other stuff. So that's a little bit of a wait and see for me. But it's close. I think we have to wait and see how it all unfolds.
Is the same
These
true
are some very
for
interesting hypotheticals that we're throwing out there, and man, is this making me so excited for the draft. Holy smokes.
We could just not talk about it and wait 8 days and we'd have the answers, but
this is fun.
But it's more fun
thought
this
exercise.
Yeah. And the other thing is, what if the Patriots are one of the ones, because you guys brought this up last week and I've been thinking about it a lot. Like, I adore Drake May, but he's useless to me in New England uniform for that first year, probably.
Maybe even longer. I mean,
maybe
what if they don't even decide to play him a lot as a rookie because the roster's so bad they gave him the full year to sit? I feel like the Patriots are in like year 0 of a rebuild, and probably 2025 and 26 is when they really start to put this roster together. Just give me the running back that's going to produce right away at a position that these guys can have a big impact right away. So it's really, really intriguing. Matt, I want to ask you.
I'll throw one more thing out there. I apologize because Peacock and I talk about this a lot. And this is more of an NFL thing, but it is something I want to put out there before the draft, dynasty-wise. If you offered me all 32 GM jobs in the league, my last choice would be Denver. So if they go for a Nix or a Penix or get crazy and Peyton trades up for McCarthy or something nuts, I foresee problems there for a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. That's another spot that I kind of don't want Bo Nix or
Yeah.
Michael Penix to land, just because I think it's going to nuke their fantasy value and their dynasty value in the short and the long term. Ben, I want to ask you about some veterans that we think could have a pretty significant rise in their ADP after the draft. We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to a perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats right now and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make this process easier. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We wanted to let you know about the Locked On NFL Mock Draft Live Show on April 17th. That's today at 7 p.m. Eastern, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the Ultimate 6 Series episode on April 17th, again today at 7 p.m. to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL mock draft on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, our next question here, Matt, is which veterans could see their overall value in their ADP rise post-draft? You got anybody in mind?
I got 4 names that are all sort of in the same boat, sort of similar. They are going somewhere between wide receiver 25 and 35 right now. They're a little older. People aren't as excited about them anymore, but Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin. They're all really good at football. I don't think, someone's going to draft a great receiver ahead of them in their team. Everyone's going to pivot to all the new situations where I'm just going to kind of lean on the old and be like, Cooper Kupp's still going to catch 85 balls. He's still pretty good. They're not going to add a stud receiver. Amari Cooper is going to lead the Browns in receiving easily, and they're just not exciting. They're not sexy this time of year, but you can get them a little bit cheaper.
Kate, what do you got?
I'm kind of intrigued by the value of George Pickens right now at wide receiver 27. And I'm talking about a veteran who is going to gain value with the draft, because I think either the Steelers get a trade done for a top end wide receiver that is going to open things up for George Pickens along the outside, or they're probably going to draft one in the top 2 rounds. Like, there are about a million different ways that the Steelers can play out this draft, but there's no way that they don't address the wide receiver position. And I think he's one of the guys that is going to benefit from the addition of talent, as opposed to, not, being threatened by a potential loss in target share. I think that would be great for George Pickens. Another name, I want to talk about the running back situation. I want to talk about James Cook. Right now, RB14, the Bills have done some studying. They've done some homework on the running back position. So I don't think that they're above taking a running back in the draft. Although I got to say, prioritizing running back when they have other needs, be it wide receiver, cornerback, they have a lot of other top needs that I think probably need addressing more urgently than the running back position. But James Cook, we saw his upside in the second half of last season in this offensive scheme. It was all James Cook all the time. And if you're going to give him 20 plus touches a game, I just can't fathom a world where he doesn't, live up to RB14 at best.
Matt, I want your thoughts on George Pickens. What do you think about the idea of his ADP going up after the draft?
Well, what I think they're going to do in some way, shape, or form is add 2 more receivers. And they have been linked to many veterans. I mean, I know for a fact Mike Williams had plane reservations to come here, but he signed in New York, and there's been a lot of those type of, kicking the tires on veterans. And frankly, after the Deontay Johnson trade, I thought by now a better veteran would be on this team. I'm not talking about...
You're not excited about Van Jefferson?
Van Jefferson or Quez Watkins, So right now, Pickens to me is a real squint to call him an NFL 1. I mean, I think there's 15 of them in the world, and he's not there yet. He's a nice 2, and then they have 3 4s. I mean, it's Austin, Watkins, and Van Jefferson. So I think the need is overwhelming to add 2. One of them will certainly come via the draft. And I honestly, no one's been telling me this, but I thought they would be in the Aiyuk, Diggs, maybe a Chris Godwin, maybe a Devontae Adams. I'm just kind of reaching for who's a big name guy that they could go get at a reasonable price because they have the cap space. So I think there'll be a veteran of note and a day 2 pick.
Interesting. All right. I want to just give a couple guys. I'm going to go a little bit higher up. I'm going Dalton Kincaid as my first one. He's being drafted as tight end 6 right now. I won't be surprised if his ranking among tight ends doesn't go up because it's really hard to jump some of the other names ahead of him. But I think there's a good chance that Buffalo doesn't draft a receiver in round 1, or if they do draft a receiver in round 1, it's Xavier Worthy. And while I really like Xavier Worthy, it's not anybody that's going to take a significant amount of targets away from Dalton Kincaid. If they come out of this draft and it's Xavier Worthy and Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir as the outside receivers, all that tells me is that Dalton Kincaid is going to get even more targets. So he's probably somebody that I'm buying now ahead of the draft because I just think his ADP is going to go up. And then the other name that I wanted to mention, I want your thoughts on this one too, Matt, is Garrett Wilson at wide receiver 8. Him and Malik Neighbors actually have just about the same ADP, which I think is pretty wild. There's been some smoke about maybe the Jets trying to draft a Brock Bowers or a Roma Dunze. I just get the sense that the Jets are going to take an offensive lineman because that was such an issue for them last year at number 10. And we're going to be locked and loaded in Garrett Wilson having 175, 180 targets this year. So what do you think about the potential of Wilson not really adding any competition this year?
Couple things is you mentioned Kincaid as it stands today, and even if they draft the guy in the first round at wide receiver, I think I want Kincaid over every dynasty tight end not named Sam Laporta. I mean, over McBride, over Andrews, over Hawkinson. As for the Jets, I think Fatanu is a name to watch there because they could plug him in immediately at guard. And then I'm saying when, not if, one of their old tackles gets hurt, he bumps out or Vera Tucker bumps out. I mean, they do have that guard tackle versatility with Vera Tucker. And if you could add another one, that would be great. And I love the Bowers fit. But one thing I think of note here is Rodgers never fed rookie pass catchers. I mean, it took a long time to earn his trust. I mean, Bowers might be special, but I don't know that he's going to be 100 catch guy right off the bat. I mean, Rodgers is going to throw to guys he loves. That's why Cobb and those type of guys follow him around because it's a trust thing. And I'm sure he helps his buddies out too. And he didn't get to play with Wilson or any of them really last year, but he had a whole camp with them. Wilson was still super productive with awful quarterback play. He has nowhere to go but up, which is bonkers.
Kate, any thoughts on those two before we move on?
I can see it. But I think my biggest question is who do they overtake, right?
Well, so AJ Brown is currently being drafted 1 spot ahead of Garrett Wilson. I would just rather have Garrett Wilson straight up right now, and especially after the draft.
I think that's probably as high as he can get, right? I think that's 1 spot.
Okay,
I don't know. Can we call him a big riser?
Do you think I think there's a good chance that he could overtake Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I know I'm higher on Wilson than Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I understand, but I just think Wilson's the better player. And if the
I
Jets
do
can
too.
shore up the offensive line, why couldn't Wilson outproduce him?
I think it's fair. It's a fair question.
Am I crazy, Matt?
No, I mean, we're splitting hairs because
Yeah.
nobody dislikes AJ Brown or Amon-Ra St.
No,
Brown.
of course
we're
not.
splitting. Yeah, we're splitting
Right,
hairs at this point. Yes.
I'm glad that you guys.
I wouldn't put his college teammate too far off though in Chris Olave because I don't
No, I
think they're
wouldn't
going to
either.
draft. They're going to add O-line. Carr's in his second year. I mean, he has nowhere to. I mean, there's not a lot to go in front of him too, but he could spike after the draft too and really be a true one.
I agree with that. Wide receiver 12 right now. He's falling a little bit in dynasty leagues.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the better call there. I love Chris Olave.
Me too.
All right, let's talk about another first round receiver that, frankly, I have no idea what to do with. We will get to him next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told that I'm a competitive person. I love sports. I love board games. I love video games. We all have a competitive side. My competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it before. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist of Monopoly where you play on not just one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly. But now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. This next question comes from at Marcus_Mosier. Matt, I got to know, what do we do here with Brandon Aiyuk? Because he's being drafted as wide receiver 14. Every time I log into Twitter, there's some crazy rumor or some news about him unfollowing the 49ers on social media and all that kind of stuff. What do we do with Brandon Aiyuk amidst all this contract nonsense?
So, as you can imagine, I'm a Steelers guy. Brian Peacock hosts Locked On 49ers. This comes up a lot because he's been linked to the Steelers. He's been linked to the Jags. I mean, he's been linked to a lot. There's a lot of wide receiver needy teams out there. And frankly, I think Aiyuk is one of the top 10 best wide receivers on the planet right now and is ascending. I think he is a great player that, if anything, is underrated. Now, I try to think as the Niners think, though, and certainly Peacock thinks this way as well. He's like, why would we move this guy? We're one of the best teams in the league. We have a short window with a quarterback making no money. We're doing everything possible to be aggressive and win the Super Bowl this year. What he believes is going to happen is they are going to play out Aiyuk's deal and then trade Debo after the year and then give Aiyuk the bag. You know what I mean? And to me, that's the logical move. I mean, yeah, maybe the Steelers would give you the 20th pick in the draft, and maybe you get Brian Thomas there. Maybe. You know what I mean? But I'm trying to win this thing, and pretty soon Purdy's going to get expensive. I think they run it back, and maybe I'm crazy, and maybe it's unfixable, but that logic to me makes more sense for San Francisco.
Kate?
I definitely agree that trading Brandon Aiyuk isn't the smart decision. I do think Brandon Aiyuk, though he is not, maybe as versatile a player as Debo, they have very different strengths and abilities. I think Brandon Ayuk's the better wide receiver. And I do think generally an underrated one, especially as a Steelers fan who has followed the discourse, the number of Steelers fans who don't think it would be worthwhile to send a first round pick for Brandon Aiyuk, it blows my mind, to be honest, because he is a top 10 route runner in the NFL pretty easily, probably top 5. The ability to separate, I think he's pretty much scheme proof. Like, you can't do much better than Brandon Aiyuk. But I think in terms of dynasty value, he's in an interesting spot. Right now, drafted wide receiver 14 on Dynasty League football, behind guys like Tyreek Hill, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle. And I think you could reasonably make the case for maybe every single one of those except Tyreek Hill, depending on what stage you're at in your dynasty, in terms of competitiveness. But he feels undervalued to me there. And, maybe he goes to a new offense. I'm trying to think of examples other than the Steelers, but he does have an opportunity to have an increased target share that might lend itself to more consistency on a weekly basis from a fantasy perspective. Like, I'm buying.
Matt, are you buying?
Yeah, just because I think the player is awesome, to be honest with you. I think he's in a really good situation. His situation could get better in San Francisco a year from now if Debo moves on. And if I were them, I'd rather invest in Aiyuk than Debo, especially because style of play and the physicality and how much, he's a little older as well. I mean, yards per route run, only Tyreek and Nico Collins were better than him last year. And I think he's ascending. So, yeah, you'd have a hard time prying Aiyuk off my dynasty team.
Yeah, we're all in agreement. We all think he's value right now, wide receiver 14. Kind of ignore the noise because he's either going to be back with the 49ers or, and this is probably the worst case scenario, he's going to get traded to a team that gave up significant assets to get him and gave him a monster contract, which almost assuredly locks him into an even bigger role on a new team. So, yeah, go buy Brandon Aiyuk right now while he's still relatively cheap because we all believe he's a top 12 receiver at worst in Dynasty, at worst.
Yeah. I think Kate and I would love him to be in the black and gold, but I don't know that his Dynasty stock would
not a great,
situation.
Not a great fantasy. Let's hope he doesn't land there. At least.
Yeah.
All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Every dayers on tomorrow's show, we're going to break down Florida State running back Trey Benson, a favorite of mine. We'll talk his dynasty value, some potential fits, and of course, we'll look at his analytic profile as well. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. You can also go follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Go check out his new YouTube channel. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.